Welcome, dear listener, to Zen Mind Journey, a den of tranquility to rest the mind. Before we begin our journey together, take a moment to arrive fully, to leave behind the bustle, the endless chatter, and the weight of your day. Let those worries drift away now, like morning mist lifting from a calm lake. Breathe in slowly. Feel the cool air fill your lungs. Exhale softly. Release everything you no longer need. Feel the surface beneath you, solid and steady, supporting your entire being. There is no need to hurry, no need to fix or solve. You have done enough for now. This time is yours to simply be, to rest in the gentle embrace of now. Tonight's story holds no answers, no puzzles to unravel, only a gentle invitation to listen deeply, to wander softly through a world woven from silence, seasonal whispers, and the tender pulse of stillness. Each word will ripple gently through your mind. Each pause will cradle you deeper. Each soft sound beneath the voice will guide you inward to a place of calm, of rest, of quiet breath that knows no effort. As you journey here, you may see visions unfolding or simply feel the calm settle within. There is no right way to receive this moment, only your way, and it is enough. Let these words wash over you like gentle rain on ancient stones, and take root like seeds of peace in the fertile soil of your being. If sleep calls you, let it come, softly, peacefully, completely. Your journey begins now.
In a village cradled by rolling hills and ancient trees, there was a house unlike any other. It had no walls, no roof, no locks, only a simple wooden door standing tall and open, as if waiting for something or someone. The villagers often passed by, curious. Some wondered if the door was a mistake or a forgotten remnant of a time long past, but no one ever tried to close it. At the center of the village lived an old man named Taro. He was the keeper of the door, not by duty, not by ownership, but by choice. Each morning, Taro would sweep the path before the door, light a lantern nearby and sit just beyond it, his hands folded calmly in his lap. He never told anyone why the door stood open, nor did he say who had placed it there. The children whispered stories. Some said the door led to other worlds. Others said it was a gateway to dreams. But Taro would only smile gently, his eyes crinkling like folded paper. "This door is not locked," he'd say, "because some doors are meant to remain open." One evening, as the sun dipped below the hills, a stranger arrived in the village. No one knew where he came from. He carried a heavy bag, and his eyes held questions. He walked to the door, paused, and stepped through. The stranger stepped through the door into a world not quite like his own. The air was softer here, filled with the scent of pine and earth, and the gentle hum of unseen life. He looked around. No walls, no paths, just endless space and a sky brushed with pale colors he couldn't name. Behind him, the door stood open still. A silent invitation. A promise. The stranger wandered slowly, feet bare on soft moss, letting the silence guide him. After some time, he heard footsteps. Not hurried, not loud, A figure approached. It was Taro. The old man smiled, hands folded as always. "You've crossed," he said softly. "Now, you must learn to walk." The stranger frowned. "Walk where?" Taro gestured broadly. "Wherever the door leads." They walked together, not toward a destination, but alongside the space itself. Taro shared no words beyond that. Instead, he moved with calm certainty, teaching the stranger how to listen. To the wind, to the quiet, to the spaces between moments. Days passed like this. The stranger learned to move without rushing, to breathe without filling the air, to watch without needing to see. And slowly he began to understand. The door was not a passage to another place, but an opening within, an invitation to walk through silence, to find the space where things are neither kept nor lost. The stranger and Taro sat beneath a tree, the open door glowing softly behind them. For the first time, the stranger spoke his questions aloud. Why does the door remain open? Why not close it and keep what lies beyond safe? Taro smiled, his eyes reflecting years of stillness. Because the door is not a barrier, but a bridge. A place where what is inside and what is outside meet. To close it, he continued, would be to forget that some things are meant to be shared, meant to be seen even when unseen. The stranger nodded slowly, feeling the truth settle in the quiet between words. But what if others come? What if they try to close it? Taro's gaze softened. Then we remind them, not with words but with presence, with a stillness that cannot be moved by fear. They sat in silence, the light from the door flickering like a gentle flame. The stranger realized that the door was not a thing to guard. It was a way to be open, patient, and unafraid. As the days passed, the stranger learned to carry the door with him, not as a physical thing, but as a way of living. To keep his heart open, to meet the world without locking away what mattered most. And when it was time to leave, he did so with a deep bow. Taro watched him go without a word, because the door remained, always, waiting, open. The stranger returned to his village, but he carried the door with him, not as wood or hinges, but as a quiet space inside his heart. He no longer feared the world, nor did he seek to close himself off. Instead, he opened to it, to its light, its shadow, its endless flow. At times, when the noise became too loud, or the world felt heavy, he would close his eyes and stand before the door he always carried within. He would breathe, and the door would open, not to a place but to presence, a place where fear could not reach, where kindness could flow freely, where silence was not absence, but invitation. The villagers noticed the change in him. They felt it in his voice, his calm gestures, and the way his eyes seemed to listen. One evening, a child came to him and asked, "Where is your door? Can I see it?" He smiled softly. "It is always open," he said. "But you cannot see it with your eyes, only with your heart." And so he taught them to listen, to the moments between words, to the spaces between breaths, to the quiet that waits beneath all noise. Because some doors are not meant to be closed, they are meant to remain open, always.
And now, for the next story.
quiet temple nestled between two ridges where the moss grew thick and undisturbed, there lay a small rock garden. Not grand, not ornate, just a rectangle of sand, a handful of stones, and the slow rhythm of time passing through shadows. Each morning, an old monk named Ray would step into the garden barefoot, a wooden rake in hand. He would not speak. He would not sweep. He would listen, and then, with a long exhale, he would begin. His rake moved in slow, deliberate arcs, etching lines through the sand like ripples in a still pond. Around the stones, he circled, never touching them, only framing them with space. It was said Ray had tended the garden for 60 years, but no one ever asked him why. Because those who visited, those who stayed long enough to notice, began to hear something in the patterns he drew. Not a sound exactly, but a feeling. As if the garden, though still, was speaking, a whisper without breath, a voice made of sand. One evening, a young novice named Jun stood at the edge of the garden and asked Ray, "What are you listening for?" Ray paused, the rake resting gently in the sand. He turned to Jun, eyes soft with age. "Not for," he said. "With." Jun frowned. He did not understand. But something in the monk's stillness made him quiet his questions. He simply stood and watched as Ray returned to his raking. The lines flowed, the stones held their silence, and somewhere between the two, Jun began to hear something. He couldn't name it, but it brushed the edge of his thoughts like wind through tall grass. The next morning, just after the bell had echoed through the temple, Ray approached Jun as he finished sweeping the corridor. He handed the young novice the rake. Worn, simple, smoothed by years of quiet hands. "Today," Ray said softly, "the garden listens to you." Jun hesitated, "But I don't know the patterns." Ray smiled. "Neither do I." With that, he bowed and stepped aside. Jun entered the garden. His feet touched the cool sand. The early light stretched long shadows across the stones. He stood still, then began to rake. Straight lines, as he had seen Ray do, then curves, then spirals around the largest stone. But something felt wrong. The rake scratched too loudly. The lines felt forced. His hands tensed with the urge to make it look right. Ray, from the edge of the porch, said only, "You are trying to draw. Try to listen instead." Jun stopped. He closed his eyes. The wind brushed past his ear. A crow called from the distant trees. His own heartbeat, steady now, like footsteps on soft ground. He opened his eyes and looked at the garden. Not as a surface to change, but as something already speaking. He moved the rake again, this time slower, gentler, letting the stones shape his path. A curve here, a space there, a pause. The sound of the rake softened. The garden responded. Not with noise, but with ease. The lines no longer mattered. They would vanish with the breeze. What stayed was something deeper. When Jun stepped out of the sand, Ray took the rake and nodded. "You heard it." Jun said nothing, but his breath was different. He would never rake as Ray did, nor was he meant to. But the whisper, the one that lived between movement and stillness, had begun to speak to him too. Days passed, then weeks. The rhythm of the temple continued, bells, incense, chores, study. But something in June had slowed, softened. He found himself pausing more often, listening to small sounds. Broom bristles against wood, a leaf dropping into water, his own breath as it entered and left without needing permission. One morning, rain came. Not a storm, not a drizzle, a steady, patient fall that turned the world to silver. The monks remained indoors. The garden would not be raked today. But John stepped out anyway. He walked barefoot, the wooden porch cool beneath him. He carried no rake, only stillness. As he approached the garden, he noticed something. The sand was soaked, the lines from the day before erased. The stones gleamed under the rain, dark, grounded, unmoved. He sat at the edge of the garden, did nothing, and said nothing. And then he heard it, a whisper, not from the rain, not from the stones, from within. A knowing he could not name, a presence without form. The garden, even undone by water, still spoke, not with symbols, not with marks in the sand, but with presence, with the patience to remain even when all patterns have been washed away. John sat there for a long time, rain touching his robe, soaking through. But he did not move, because nothing was missing, nothing needed to be added. The silence was not empty, it was full, and it welcomed him. When the rain finally slowed and the sky brightened, John rose. He bowed to the garden and walked back inside, his heart as still as the stones. The next morning, June rose before the bell. The rain had passed, leaving behind a freshness that clung to every leaf and stone. He walked quietly to the garden. The sand was damp, untouched, open. Ray was already there, standing, still. In his hands the rake, but he did not move. He simply looked at the garden as if it was speaking still. June bowed. Ray returned the gesture. Then, without a word, he placed the rake in June's hands and stepped aside. June stood there for a long time. He did not begin right away. He waited until he felt the quiet return. Then he raked. Not to form something, not to impress, only to move with what was already there. The sand yielded easily, the stones accepted their silence. And between them, a whisper. John could not say what it meant, only that it felt like remembering something he had never been told. When he finished, Ray stepped forward. He did not inspect the patterns, he did not nod. Instead, he handed John a small object, a stone, smooth, plain, ordinary. "What is this for?" John asked. Ray looked at the garden, then at John. "To carry the whisper wherever you go." John closed his fingers around the stone. It was warm from Ray's hand, and somehow it felt full, not with weight, but with presence. That afternoon, John left the temple. He did not say goodbye. Nor did Ray. They only bowed as stillness bowed to stillness. In the years that followed, John became a teacher, but he spoke little and raked nothing. He carried the stone with him, not to show but to remember. And those who sat near him said they felt something odd. A quiet in the bones, a hush behind the noise, as if a garden, somewhere unseen, was drawing lines in soft sand, just for them.
And now, for the next story.
In a village wrapped in mist and maple leaves, there stood an old bell tower. Tall and weathered, it had no bells, only silence. The villagers said the tower was empty, except for a fox who slept there. No one knew where the fox had come from. Some said it was a spirit, others, a guardian. Every evening as the sun dipped low, the fox would climb the narrow stairs and curl into a quiet circle beneath the empty bell. It never howled, it never stirred, only slept, as if keeping watch over the village's dreams. One morning, a young boy named Kaito decided to visit the tower. He had heard the stories and wanted to see if the fox was real. He climbed the stairs carefully, heart steady and soft with wonder. At the top, he found the fox, fur glowing faintly in the morning light, eyes closed, breathing slow and even. The fox seemed a stillness made flesh, a living breath of calm, as if the silence itself had chosen this form. Kaito did not speak. He simply sat beside the fox, feeling the quiet wrap around them both. The morning light filtered through the tower's wooden slats, casting gentle shadows that danced across the floor, and the air was thick with the scent of pine and earth, a reminder of the stillness held in nature's heart. The fox opened one eye, looked at him, then closed it again. No fear, no haste, just presence. Kaito stayed for a long time, listening, waiting, and in that stillness he felt the tower itself breathing with life, as if the ancient wood held memories of countless nights, and the dreams whispered beneath its watch. Days passed, and Kaito returned often to the bell tower. Each time he found the fox curled beneath the empty bell, quiet, still, yet somehow full of unseen energy. One afternoon, as golden light spilled through the slats, Kaito sat cross-legged and asked softly, "Why do you sleep here when the village is so far below?" The fox opened its eyes slowly, and for a moment, Kaito thought it might speak. But it only blinked, then nudged a small stone toward him. Kaito picked it up, smooth, warm, and heavy in his palm. He looked at the fox, waiting for more. The fox rose, stretched with the grace of the wind, and moved to the edge of the tower. There it paused, looking out over the village below. Roofs glowing softly in the fading light. It turned back to Kaito, and in its eyes he saw a story, not told with words, but felt deeply. The fox seemed to say, "I watch while you dream. I rest so you may rest. I carry the quiet between your thoughts." Kaito nodded, understanding without understanding. He stayed until the stars appeared, then climbed down slowly, carrying the stone and the silence with him. Over time, the villagers noticed a change. The nights felt softer, dreams came easier, and when the wind brushed the rooftops, it sounded like a whisper, a fox's lullaby from the tower above. Kaito knew the secret now. The fox was not just a creature. It was a guardian of peace, of sleep, and of the fragile threads that hold the village together. One evening, Kaito gathered the children of the village near the base of the bell tower. He told them the story, not in words, but in silence. He showed them the smooth stone the fox had left, warm in his hand. "This is a piece of the quiet," he said softly, "carried from the tower, where the fox sleeps and watches." The children listened with wide eyes, breathing in the stillness that seemed to ripple from the tower itself. Kaito taught them to sit quietly, to close their eyes and to imagine the fox's soft breath moving through the village, a lullaby woven into the night air. The villagers began to join in. At dusk, they would gather under the tower, holding stones like Kaitos, and share moments of silence. The air grew lighter, tensions softened, even the busiest workers paused to breathe and listen. The fox watched, still sleeping, still guarding, as peace grew in the hearts of those below. One night, Kaito climbed the tower once more. The fox was there, its eyes open now, reflecting the stars. It stepped forward, nudged the stone in Kaito's hand, and then curled once more, ready to rest, ready to watch. Kaito smiled, feeling the gentle weight of quiet settling deep inside. He knew the fox's gift was not just for sleep. It was a gift of presence, of stillness, of the soft spaces between thought and dream. Seasons passed, the village changed, as all things do. But the bell tower remained, and so did the fox. It became more than a guardian, more than a watcher. It became a symbol of peace, of calm, of care. Villagers would speak softly of the fox, tell stories to their children, not just of magic, but of quiet presence. At times, when the world felt too loud, they would climb the tower steps and sit in silence, feeling the weight of stillness settle around them. The fox slept, but never truly rested. Its watch was gentle, unceasing, woven through the dreams of every home below. And Kaito, now grown, a keeper of stories himself, would visit often. He would place a smooth stone at the base of the tower, a token of gratitude and remembrance. And when the wind brushed the leaves, it carried a whisper, not of fear, not of hurry, but of rest, of safety, of the quiet heart that watches over us when we sleep. And so the bell tower stood, a silent guardian in the mist, holding space for peace, and the fox who slept within.
And now, for the next story.
In a quiet dojo nestled among whispering bamboo, there was a moment held sacred, the silence after the bow. It was not the bow itself, not the graceful bending of bodies, nor the soft sound of feet touching polished wood. It was the stillness that followed, a breath suspended, a space where time seemed to pause and the world became utterly present. The masters called it the meeting of hearts, the place where respect transcends form and becomes presence. Each day, students would enter the dojo, their minds busy with worry, their bodies ready for movement. But before the first step, they would bow, and then they would listen to the silence, to the space that holds both student and teacher. This silence was like a river, calm on the surface, but deep and flowing underneath. It carried the weight of centuries of practice, the breath of countless souls who had stood in the same spot, bowed in the same way, and let the silence teach them. One morning, a young student named Hana noticed the silence more than the bow. She felt it linger, a delicate thread connecting her to the master, to the room, and most of all, to herself. It was in this silence that she began to understand what the practice truly meant. She realized that the bow was not just a gesture, but a gateway, a moment to set aside distraction, to meet the present without judgment, a moment to open and receive, As Hannah stood in that silence, she felt the tension in her shoulders soften like a leaf falling to earth. The noise in her mind began to fade, not all at once, but like waves gently retreating from a quiet shore. She could hear her own breath, slow and steady, the gentle beat of her heart, and the soft rustle of bamboo leaves outside the open window. The room was filled with light, golden and warm, casting soft shadows that danced like whispers against the wooden floor. Hannah's eyes closed, and she felt herself expand beyond the body, beyond the dojo, to something vast and unending. The silence was not empty. It was full of stories unspoken, lessons not taught with words, and wisdom carried in the spaces between sounds. She understood then that the silence after the bow was a teacher itself, a reminder that respect is not just shown, but felt, not just given, but received, and that in this quiet moment, connection blooms, between bodies, between hearts, between all things. The next day, Hannah arrived earlier than usual. The air was cool and crisp, tinged with the scent of rain-soaked earth and fresh bamboo shoots. She sat cross-legged in the corner, watching the room slowly fill. Other students arrived, some nervous, some confident, each carrying their own stories, their own busy thoughts. But when the master entered and the bow was made, the room fell into the same sacred silence. Hannah noticed the faces change, muscles relaxing, eyes softening, breath deepening. The silence connected them all, like an invisible thread woven through the space. It was a moment without words, without instruction, a pause pregnant with possibility. And in that moment, she felt held. Days passed, and Hannah found herself returning to the silence again and again. It was no longer just a pause, but a presence. A space where the noise of the world fell away like leaves in autumn. In the quiet, she could hear the soft rhythm of her own breath, the gentle beat of her heart, and the steady footsteps of those around her. She began to notice the small things, the way sunlight filtered through bamboo leaves, creating patterns on the floor that shifted with each passing cloud. The soft whisper of wind moving through the grove outside the dojo, the distant call of a bird, and the gentle rustle of fabric as students shifted in meditation. One afternoon, after a long practice, she sat beneath the bamboo grove near the dojo. The earth was cool beneath her hands, the scent of moss and fresh grass filled the air, the light was dappled and soft, and the world felt like a quiet breath held between heartbeats. Hannah closed her eyes and listened. The silence was not empty. It was full of stories unspoken, lessons not taught with words, and wisdom carried in the spaces between sounds. She understood then that the silence after the bow was a teacher itself, a reminder that respect is not just shown, but felt, not just given, but received, and that in this quiet moment, connection blooms, between bodies, between hearts, between all things. Hannah felt a gentle warmth spread through her chest, a kindness flowing outward, connecting her to the trees, the earth, and the soft sky above. It was as if the silence held a sacred space where all things could simply be. In the days that followed, Hannah began to carry this silence with her outside the dojo, into the marketplace, into her home, into her conversations. She found that when she slowed, when she listened deeply, the world around her changed. People spoke more softly, smiled more often, and moments that once felt rushed became invitations to breathe. One morning, as she walked along a quiet path, she paused beneath a great cherry blossom tree. Petals drifted like pink snow around her, and she closed her eyes once more, feeling the quiet deepen. She realized that the silence after the bough was not only a practice, but a way of being, a way to carry peace within and share it without words. Hana returned to the dojo the next morning, her heart lighter, her mind quieter. She bowed deeply, more fully than before, and let the silence settle between her and the master. This time, the silence stretched gently, like a soft thread weaving them together. Her movements became slower, more deliberate, flowing with the rhythm of breath and presence. The lessons she had learned were no longer just about form, but about the spaces in between. She noticed how the pauses in movement held as much meaning as the actions themselves. After practice, she would sit beneath the bamboo again, feeling the whispers of leaves above her. She noticed how the wind moved not against the trees but through them, a dance of stillness and motion. She understood that true harmony comes not from forcing, but from yielding. Her days grew calmer, her steps lighter, her heart more open. Others began to notice the change in her, a quiet strength, a peace that spoke without words. Her teacher watched with gentle approval, knowing that Hana had begun to walk the path beyond technique. One evening, the master approached her and said softly, "The silence after the bough is not just a moment. It is a path. Walk it with care." Hana nodded, knowing this was only the beginning. She realized the silence was not empty, but full of life, full of connection, full of love. It was a seed planted deeply within her spirit, ready to grow and bloom in its own time. In the weeks that followed, Hana began to share this understanding quietly, gently. She taught younger students to bow and to sit with the silence after. She encouraged them to notice the space, the stillness that connects teacher and student, one soul to another. The dojo became softer, more alive. Laughter mingled with quiet breaths. The energy shifted from hurried practice to mindful presence. It was as if the very air had changed, and Hana, once a novice herself, now became a keeper of stillness, a guide to the path of quiet respect. In the weeks and months that followed, Hana carried the silence with her, into the streets, into her home, into every moment. She shared it quietly, without words or ceremony, but with a presence that touched those around her. Neighbors noticed the calm in her eyes. Friends felt the warmth of her listening. Even strangers paused when she walked by, as if the stillness she carried invited them to breathe deeper. At the dojo, she began teaching the younger students. Before each lesson, she guided them gently to bow, and then to rest in the silence after. She told them, "Respect lives here, not just in our actions, but in the quiet space between them." The dojo grew softer, more alive. The sound of laughter mingled with quiet breaths. The energy shifted from hurried practice to mindful presence. One evening, as the sun set behind the bamboo, Hana stood beside her master. Together they watched the light fade, and in that fading light, she understood. The silence after the bow was not just a practice. It was a way of being, a ripple spreading from one heart to another, a gentle wave that touched everyone it met, a reminder that in stillness we find connection, in quiet we find love, and in presence we find peace. Long after Hana's footsteps had softened on the path, her lesson remained. Students who followed felt the whisper of silence held carefully in their own boughs. The dojo, once a place of movement alone, became a sanctuary of stillness, where silence was not absence, but a presence full of life. And in that sacred space, the hearts of many met, in respect, in kindness, and in the shared rhythm of the silence after the bow.
And now, for the next story.
It began on a morning draped in grey. The sky was low, heavy with clouds, and the rain fell not in sheets, but in a soft, endless hush, like the sound of someone breathing in their sleep. A young woman stood at the edge of a mountain trail, her cloak soaked, her boots thick with mud. She had set out days ago following a map drawn in ink and given to her by someone long gone. It had led her well, until now. Now the path was gone, wiped clean by the rain, no markings, no signs, just glistening stone and the rustle of wet leaves. She stood in the drizzle, confused, frustrated, and very tired. The mountains were quiet, no birds, no wind, only water, and something else, something softer, a silence that seemed to watch her. She looked down at her feet, mud and moss, no trail. She looked ahead, mist. Then she looked inward and took a breath, not a deep one, just enough. Then, without the map, without the markers, she stepped forward. One step, then another, each footfall soft, unsure, and yet true. The path she had known was gone, but something new was beginning to form. Beneath the rain. The rain followed her, not angrily, not fiercely, but patiently, like an old friend with nothing left to prove. She walked, past trees that leaned as if listening, past stones slick with memory. Hours passed, or maybe just minutes. Time was different in the rain. Eventually, she came upon a small house barely visible through the mist. A wooden gate, painted red long ago, stood slightly open, and behind it an old man knelt in the mud, tending to a single yellow flower. He looked up as she approached, but said nothing. She stood at the gate, rain dripping from her sleeves, and asked, "Is this the path to the monastery?" The man shook his head, then nodded, then shrugged. "Yes," he said finally, "and no. It depends on what you call the path." She frowned. "I mean the one drawn on the map." He smiled. "Ah, that one. It washed away last spring. The mountain took it back." The woman looked down, felt the ache in her legs, the damp in her bones. "Then I've gone the wrong way." "Not necessarily," the man said, patting the earth beside the flower. "Sometimes the right path is the one that appears only when you stop looking for it." She said nothing, only watched the flower, its petals wet, its colour somehow brighter in the rain. The man stood slowly, his knees cracking. "You can rest here," he said, "or keep walking. Either way, you'll arrive somewhere." She looked back the way she had come, then forward, then stepped through the gate and sat. She stayed with the gardener for 2 days. They spoke little, shared warm rice, boiled tea over a small fire. The rain never stopped. Not once, but it softened, turned gentle, like a lullaby poured from clouds. On the 3rd morning she rose early. The garden glistened, mist curled between branches, and in the damp earth, tiny green shoots reached up like shy questions. She stood at the gate, uncertain. The gardener came beside her. "You'll go today," he said, not as a question, but a noticing. She nodded. "But I still don't know the way." He bent down, brushed his hand across the mossy ground, and revealed a faint trail carved not by tools, but by time. "Paths appear when feet return," he said, "even when maps do not." She stared. It was there, just barely, a crease in the forest floor, worn smooth by travellers who never left marks. "It won't be straight," the man added, "and it won't look like a path from above." She smiled. "Nothing does." In the rain. With a small bow, she thanked him, then stepped onto the trail with quiet feet and an open heart. And as she walked, the rain did not hinder her. It held her, wrapped her in silence. And somehow, each time she lost the trail, a new one appeared. Not ahead, but beneath her, as if the mountain itself was guiding her one step at a time, not by certainty, but by presence. By dusk, the trail faded again. The forest grew thicker. The rain returned, heavier now, but still soft, still kind. She stopped beneath an overhang of rock and moss, waited, listened, let the rain speak. She no longer wondered where she was. There was no map, no destination, only the sound of drops meeting stone and the slow, steady rhythm of her breath. Then, through the trees, a light, faint, warm, steady. She followed it, not quickly, not urgently, as if drawn by something older than direction. And there, in a hollow of the mountain, was a wooden temple, unmarked, unmapped, but undeniably meant. Its lanterns flickered with welcome. No gate, no name, just a space waiting to be entered. Inside, a single monk sat cross-legged by a fire. He looked up, smiled, and said, "You found it?" She lowered her hood. Steam rose from her shoulders. "I wasn't looking anymore." He nodded. "That's why you arrived." She stepped inside, removed her boots, knelt. The monk poured tea into a simple clay cup. "This place isn't on any map," he said, "because it isn't a place. It's a moment." She sipped. The warmth spread through her hands, her chest, her quiet. And outside, the rain fell like a blessing, no longer washing things away, but revealing what had always been waiting beneath the noise.
And now, for the next story.
There was once a boy who lived at the very edge of a village, where the grass grew wild and the forest whispered secrets only the wind could carry. He was not like the other children. While they chased birds and built games from sticks and stones, he chased something else. Shadows. He would rise before dawn and wait for the first stretch of light to spill over the hills, and when it did, he would watch the shadows fall, long and strange, across the earth. Then he would run, chasing them, following them, trying to step where they stepped, trying to catch what could not be held. The villagers watched. Some laughed, others shook their heads, but the boy didn't mind. To him, the shadows seemed alive, as if they were leading him somewhere he had not yet understood. Sometimes they danced behind trees, other times they vanished altogether, but always they returned. And so did he, each day, each morning, chasing the dark that danced inside the light. One morning, while following a long shadow cast by a pine tree, he stumbled upon an old man sitting by a stream. The man didn't move, didn't speak, only Saturday, still as a stone, face turned to the sun. The boy paused, watched, then asked, "Are you waiting for the shadows too?" The old man opened his eyes, smiled faintly, and said nothing, just patted the earth beside him. The boy hesitated. He had never followed a shadow to a person before, let alone one who said nothing. Still, something about the old man's silence felt more welcoming than most people's words. So he sat, not for long, just a moment, just enough. The stream bubbled softly beside them, birds shifted in the branches above, and the shadow of the pine tree moved slowly across the forest floor. The boy watched it stretch, then shrink, then vanish. He frowned. "Where did it go?" he whispered. The old man looked toward the sky. "It didn't go anywhere," he said gently. "It became something else." The boy didn't understand, but he stayed, and the old man said nothing more. Instead, he handed the boy a small flat stone, smooth and warm from the sun. "What's this for?" "To sit on, but I'm already sitting." The old man smiled, "Not the way you will." That night, the boy returned home without chasing a single shadow. He placed the stone on the floor beside his bed, and for the first time, he wondered what it would be like to stop moving. Not because he was tired, but because maybe there was something to see by staying still. The next morning, the boy didn't run. He walked, quietly, slowly, holding the stone in his hand like a secret. He returned to the stream. The old man was there again, knees folded, face turned to the rising light. This time, the boy didn't speak. He simply sat, placed the stone beneath him, and listened. For a while, nothing happened. The forest rustled. A dragonfly passed. Then the old man spoke. "You've followed shadows, but have you ever asked what they are?" The boy thought for a moment. "They're shapes made by light." "Yes," the man nodded, "but they're also the places where light cannot go." The boy turned his head slowly, watching his own shadow on the mossy ground. It looked like him, but not. He reached for it. His fingers passed through nothing. The man continued, "Shadows are not lies. They're reminders." "Reminders of what?" "Of what stands in the way." The boy looked at the trees, each one casting long, cool silhouettes across the forest floor. So when I chase them, I'm chasing what blocks the light, the old man smiled. Perhaps you're learning how to walk alongside it. A silence fell again, but this one felt deeper, fuller, like the space between notes in a song. The boy closed his eyes, listened to the breeze, felt the sunlight on his face, and the cool shadow on his back. For the first time, he didn't need to chase. He simply stayed. Years passed. The boy, now a young man, still walked to the stream, still carried the stone, still sat beside the old man when he was there. But more often now, he came alone. Not to chase, not to search, just to sit. The shadows still moved, as they always had, stretching, shifting, curling beneath trees and across water. But he no longer followed them. He watched, he breathed, he listened. One morning, as he sat in stillness, a group of children passed by. They laughed, ran, leapt through puddles of shadow as he once had. One of them paused, watching him curiously. "What are you looking at?" the child asked. The young man smiled. "Nothing," he said, "and everything." The child frowned, ran to catch the others. The young man looked down at the stone in his hand, worn now, smoothed by time and patience. He placed it gently beside the stream, then stood. The sun was rising, his shadow stretched before him, long and light and quietly familiar. He didn't chase it, but he followed it, not with urgency, but with trust, because he understood now, shadows weren't destinations, they were companions, reminders, reflections, and most of all, invitations to return to the light that cast them. That evening, as the forest darkened and the last birds quieted, he sat once more beneath the trees. No shadows remained, only darkness, only stillness, and within that stillness, he found something else. Not light, not shadow, but the space where both could meet.
And now, for the next story.
In a distant mountain village where mists floated like silk scarves, there lived a tea master. He was old, very old. His fingers were thin as reeds, his eyes like quiet ponds, and his tea house, small and low, sat among flowering plum trees that blossomed even in the snow. Each morning, before the sun rose, he lit a single candle and prepared a tray with 3 cups. 2 were for guests. The third always sat untouched. No one ever drank from it. No tea was poured into it. No lips had ever met its rim. And yet, the master set it out every single day. When asked why, he would only smile and say, "It is not ready," or sometimes, "The right guest has not yet arrived." Some villagers thought it strange, others called it poetic, but most simply forgot about the cup. All except one, a traveller, young, restless, with a pack full of questions, wandered into the village on the trail of something he couldn't name. He had heard of the master. He came seeking wisdom, clarity, answers. And on the 3rd morning he was invited into the tea house. The tea was fragrant, the silence warm, but his eyes kept drifting to the 3rd cup, empty, unblemished, waiting, and something about it unsettled him. He wanted to know more, much more. The next day the traveller returned. He bowed, removed his shoes, sat quietly on the straw mat. Again the master poured tea into 2 cups and placed the third, as always, between them. The traveller waited. Perhaps today, he thought, perhaps today I will see it used. But no tea was poured into the third. No gesture, no explanation, just silence and steam. The traveller sipped his tea. It was perfect. Still, he couldn't stop staring at the untouched cup. On the 4th visit, he finally asked, "Why do you prepare a cup you never use?" The master looked at him, eyes gentle, then replied, "Some things are not meant to be filled." The traveller frowned. "But a cup is made to hold tea. Isn't that its purpose?" The master smiled. "And yet, isn't it the empty space inside the cup that makes it useful?" The traveller fell silent. He thought of all the things in his life he had rushed to fill. His schedule, his journal, his conversations. Always pouring in more, rarely listening to the space between. He visited the tea house many times after that. Each time, the cup remained, still, untouched, radiating a presence he couldn't explain. And little by little, he stopped asking about it. He just sat. And over time, the silence felt less like absence and more like invitation. Seasons turned. The traveller left the village, not suddenly, but with a soft farewell like the final note of a song. He carried no scrolls, no answers, only the memory of quiet tea and a cup that never held a drop. He journeyed far, to noisy cities, to desert temples, to crowded markets and empty hills. He learned many things, saw much of the world. But sometimes, in the hush between conversations, his mind would drift to the old tea house, to the scent of steam, to the silence wrapped in warm ceramic. Years passed, his hair greyed, his pace slowed, and one spring morning his path turned once again toward the mountain village. It hadn't changed much. The plum trees still bloomed. The air still held the scent of wood smoke and petals. He found the tea house, still standing, still quiet, and the master, gone. But inside, a younger monk greeted him, offered him tea. 3 cups were set, 2 were poured, the third untouched, exactly as before. The traveller blinked. His hand trembled slightly as he reached toward the 3rd cup, but stopped just shy of touching it. Instead, he smiled, deeply, softly, and whispered, "Thank you for waiting." The monk said nothing, only bowed, and in that silence the traveller understood. The cup had never been about tea. It had always been about presence, about a space held open patiently for something beyond words. The traveller stayed in the village. At first, just for the night, then for the season, then for good. He tended the tea house, swept its floors, trimmed the garden, welcomed guests, and each morning before the sun climbed the sky, he lit a candle, boiled the water, and set out 3 cups, 2 for those who came, and 1, as before, But those who stayed in silence understood more than words could offer. The traveller, now older than the master had ever been, spoke less, smiled more. He poured tea with slow grace, never hurried, never distracted, and always that third cup sat in its place, a gentle reminder that not all things must be filled, that some vessels are sacred precisely because they wait. Sometimes he would sit alone, no guests, no sound but the kettle's hum, and still he would set the third cup, not out of habit, but as a gesture to presence, to stillness, to the mystery that drinks without drinking. One morning a child arrived, wide-eyed, barefoot, quiet. He stared at the empty cup for a long time, then looked up and asked, "Whose cup is that?" The old man smiled. "It belongs to everyone who hasn't arrived yet." The child nodded, though he didn't understand. Not yet. But he stayed, watched, learned. And one day, when the old man was gone, he lit a candle, boiled the water, and set out 3 cups.
And now, for the next story.
At the edge of a quiet village where the cherry blossoms fell like soft pink snow, stood a small wooden house with a paper door and a crooked roof. Inside, an old man sat at a low table facing the morning light. He was a calligrapher, or rather he had been. The villagers still brought him brushes, paper, even ink, but he no longer wrote. He simply sat, hands folded, table bare. There were no scrolls, no characters, no poetry pinned to the walls. Only a single brush laid gently across a stone tray. No ink, no water, just the brush. Each morning the old man would dip it in air and move it across invisible paper as if painting something no one else could see. To some, he seemed lost, to others, mad. But he smiled often, slept deeply, and when he walked through the village, children would bow without knowing why. One boy, curious and quiet, began to watch from a distance. Day after day he crept closer to the little house, until one morning he sat just outside the paper door and asked, "What are you painting, if there is no ink?" The old man didn't answer, not at first. He simply looked up, eyes soft and shining, and said, "Would you like to learn?" The boy hesitated, then nodded. And from that day forward, the lessons began. The next morning the boy returned. The old man placed a second brush on the tray, also dry, also waiting. The boy picked it up, confused. "There's still no ink," he said. The calligrapher nodded. "Good, then you're ready to begin." And so they did. Each day they sat side by side, moving their brushes through the air over the empty table in perfect silence. The boy was unsure at first, his strokes wild, too fast, too unsure. But the old man never corrected him, only whispered, "Slower, feel the breath in your hand. Let the brush follow your heart." Weeks passed, then months. The boy still saw no characters, no ink, no proof. But something inside him began to change. His breathing slowed, his hands steadied, his thoughts softened. Sometimes as they painted in the invisible, the wind would stir, a bird would cry, a leaf would land on the table, silent punctuation to a sentence no one could read. And still, they continued. One evening, after many silent mornings, the boy asked, "What are we writing?" The old man smiled. "Nothing." Then, he added, "and everything." One morning, as the clouds hung low over the village, the boy arrived to find a fresh pot of ink on the tray. He stared. Thick, dark, real. The old man said nothing, only nodded toward it. "Today," he said softly, "you may use it, if you choose." The boy hesitated. He had forgotten what ink felt like, how it clung to the brush, how it whispered permanence with every stroke. His hand trembled. He dipped the brush. The black glistened like night water, and he began to paint. For the first time in months, his lines left a trail, elegant curves, bold sweeps. But something felt different. He noticed his breath quicken, his thoughts sharpen, a quiet pressure behind each stroke, as if the ink demanded perfection. Halfway through, he stopped, put the brush down, and said, almost ashamed, "I liked it better when it disappeared." The old man nodded. "Ink is heavy," he said. "It carries the eye's expectation, but the invisible, that belongs to the soul." The boy stared at the page. It was beautiful, but it didn't feel like his. He picked up the dry brush again, moved it gently across the same page with no ink, and smiled. There was no mark, but he could feel every stroke, every pause, every intention. The real art, he realized, was not in the seeing, but in the being. Seasons passed, the cherry trees bloomed and fell, the boy grew taller, straight, quieter. The old man grew slower. His brush moved less, but when it did, the air seemed to pause. One morning, the boy arrived to find the paper door open, the brush tray empty, and the old man seated, facing the sun. His eyes were closed, his hands folded gently in his lap. No brush, no movement, only stillness. The boy sat beside him, waited, breathed, and after some time he picked up the old man's brush from the shelf. Still dry, still weightless. He held it above the table, and without a word, began to move. Soft strokes, air-bound arcs, pauses where the heart had once spoken. No one watched. No one needed to, because the room itself remembered. The old man opened his eyes just once more and whispered, "Now you see," then closed them again, peacefully. In the years that followed, the boy remained in the little house. He taught no lessons, hung no scrolls. But each morning, as the light crept across the floor, he painted with a brush without ink, and others began to come. Some curious, some tired, some carrying empty pages in their hearts. They sat, watched, and sometimes joined him. No words, no instructions, just the quiet rhythm of brushes moving through air. And in time, they too learned to feel what could not be seen. Not everyone understood. But those who stayed left with something deeper than art. They carried silence, stillness, presence, the memory of a brush and the echo of nothing that somehow meant everything.
And now, for the next story.
Along a narrow forest path hidden by roots and quiet moss, there sat a rock. It wasn't large, nor polished. It didn't mark anything. It didn't move. It simply rested half buried in soil as the wind passed over it, again and again. Travellers rarely noticed. Those who did never looked twice. And yet, the rock was not always the same. Each spring, as the snow melted, new droplets would carve tiny veins across its surface. In summer, sunlight warmed its face until small lichens bloomed like ancient script etched in green. Autumn brought leaves that nestled against it. Some stayed, slowly melting into the soil. And winter wrapped it in stillness so complete, even time itself seemed to pause beside it. The rock never spoke, never stirred, but it turned, not quickly, not even once a year, just a slow, imperceptible shift, so faint it could not be seen, only sensed, like a breath between moments. Some said it was the wind, others blamed the rain or the roots that grew underneath. But the truth was simpler. The rock listened to the seasons, to the footsteps, to the silence between bird calls. And with each turning, it learned something, not in words, but in wait, in patience, in how to remain and still be moved. There was a small monastery nearby, stone walls, sloped roofs, wind chimes that sang only when the mountain breeze remembered them. A young monk lived there, quiet, curious, still learning the rhythm of walking without hurry. Each morning, after sweeping the temple steps, he would walk the path that curved through the forest. He never had a destination, only a direction. And one day he saw the rock. He paused, not because it looked important, but because it looked still, perfectly still. He sat across from it, cross-legged, hands folded, and simply watched. The rock did nothing, said nothing, but something about its silence made the monk want to stay. So he did. Every morning, every season, he sat. And as the years unfolded like petals, the monk noticed things. The way moss crept along the base, the way frost melted first on one side, the way the rock seemed to shift just slightly toward the east. He never touched it, never tried to move it. He simply returned again and again, until the path itself knew his footsteps and the birds stopped flying away when he approached. Sometimes he would whisper to the stone, "Still here," and though the rock never replied, the monk always left feeling heard. It became his ritual, more sacred than prayer, a silence more eloquent than any scripture. Years passed. The monk's hair turned silver, his steps slower, but still, each morning, he walked the path. He no longer swept the temple steps. Others did that now. But the rock, that was still his, or rather, he was still its. One autumn morning he arrived later than usual. His breath came in soft clouds. His knees creaked as he lowered himself to sit. The rock, of course, was waiting, but something had changed. A line, once hidden along the base, was now clearly visible. A crack. No, a marking, a natural fold now turned just enough to catch the light. He hadn't noticed it before, but now it felt deliberate, as if the rock had finally revealed something it had been keeping for decades. The monk smiled, not with his mouth, but with his whole body. He whispered, "You've turned." And the forest, just for a breath, felt warmer. He placed his palm flat on the earth next to the rock, not touching, just close, then closed his eyes. And for a moment, the space between them, man and stone, was so still, even the wind held its breath, because this, he understood now, was the way things speak when they are truly listening. Not in words, not in signs, but in presence, in slow change, in the trust that comes from staying. That day he sat longer than usual, not because he had to, but because he didn't want to leave. That winter was long, the snow deep, the wind often too strong for walking. The monk visited less, but he never forgot. He sat by the temple window, facing the forest, eyes closed, heart listening. And when spring returned, soft and pale, he made the journey one last time. The path was overgrown, moss thick, branches lower than before. But the rock was there, turned just slightly more, its shape unfamiliar in a familiar way, like meeting an old friend with a new smile. The monk sat, though his knees ached, though his hands trembled. He brought with him a small wooden tag etched with a single word: listen. He placed it gently beside the rock, tucked beneath a fern where wind and time could do what they pleased. Then he bowed deep and long and turned to go. He did not look back, but the forest did. It watched his slow steps until they disappeared between the trunks. Then all was still again, and the rock, which had turned through decades without witness, now waited once more. Until one summer a child wandered along the path. He stopped, looked, saw the stone, and something beneath the fern. A word, faded but clear. Listen. He knelt, didn't touch, just sat. And in that moment, the rock moved. Not far, not fast, just enough. Enough to begin again.
And now, for the next story.
In a narrow lane where the morning fog lingered longest, there stood a shop with no sign, no display, and a bell above the door that had long since forgotten how to ring. The shop was plain, a single window, a crooked step, and always a faint scent of leather and cedar. Inside, before the sun ever touched the rooftops, a man worked in silence. The shoemaker, he was not young, but not yet old. His hands were worn, not with age, but with repetition. He moved slowly, deliberately, each motion measured like a monk sweeping sand in circles. He didn't rush, didn't pause. Thread through leather, tap of the mallet, soft hiss of the awl. No music, no lantern, only the grey hush of the hour before dawn. This was when he felt most himself. Not because the world was quiet, but because he was. The village rarely saw him. Shoes simply appeared, fixed, polished, left outside doorsteps with no note but a crease of care. He charged no coin. He asked no thanks. His payment was the rhythm itself, the peace that came with each stitch and every soft sigh of fabric pulled tight. Sometimes as he worked, he would whisper something to the shoes. Be kind to the feet that wear you. And then return to the next pair with the same patience and quiet grace. One morning, a child wandered past the shop. She was small, curious, dragging one boot with a broken sole that left a soft flap in her wake. She paused at the crooked step, peered through the dusty glass, and saw the shoemaker sitting quietly at his bench. He didn't look up, but he spoke. "You can come in if you like." She stepped carefully inside. The door creaked like an old song. The air smelled of wax and weathered wood. He pointed to a stool near the window. She sat, swinging her legs, watching. The shoemaker continued his work, needle and thread tight and precise. Finally, he looked at her boot. "May I?" She nodded, eyes wide. He took the boot as if it was something delicate, not broken, just waiting. He worked without speaking, and when he finished, he placed it gently at her feet and said, "Try again." She did. No flap, no drag. She grinned, a wide, wordless kind of thanks, and ran out the door without saying a thing. The shoemaker smiled. Just once, just barely. From that day on, the door was never fully shut. People began to leave their shoes on the step, not with names, not with notes, just placed with trust. And somehow they returned, stitched, softened, restored. No one saw him do it. No one knew when. But the shoes always came back better than before. And always, quietly. One rainy evening, just as the light was folding itself into the mist, a figure appeared at the door. No shoes, no umbrella, just silence and soaked sleeves. The shoemaker looked up. The man said nothing, only stepped inside, leaving faint, wet prints on the wooden floor. He carried no bag, offered no request, just sat on the same stool the child had once used. The shoemaker studied him without staring, then asked, "Have you lost something?" The man looked down at his bare feet, cracked, calloused, still trembling slightly from the cold. He nodded, but not with shame, with acceptance. The shoemaker didn't ask more. He turned, opened a low drawer and pulled out a pair of worn sandals, old but intact. He knelt quietly and placed them at the man's feet. "These aren't new," he said, "but they remember how to walk." The man bowed, not out of gratitude, but as if receiving something sacred. And when he stood, he left nothing behind. No coin, no words, only the faint echo of footsteps carried gently into the rain. Later that night, the shoemaker sat alone, the tools untouched, the bench still. But something in the silence felt warmer, not lighter, not louder, just fuller, as if the room itself had been mended in some invisible way. The years turned like pages in an old book. The fog came earlier, the mornings colder and still. The shoemaker rose before the sun, lit no lantern, and worked in silence. The shop grew older with him, the step cracked, the window clouded, the bell above the door remained quiet, though now it almost seemed respectful. Fewer people came, not because they forgot, but because the work had already touched them. Shoes that had once been mended were now passed on, from parent to child, from one quiet soul to another, each pair carrying a softness in the soul, a rhythm of care stitched into the seams. One morning the child with the broken boot returned, now grown, her eyes steady, her walk certain. She entered the shop. The door creaked. The smell was the same, but the bench was empty. No tools, no thread, no shoemaker. Only a single pair of sandals on the workbench, worn, repaired many times, placed as if in farewell. She sat, waited, listened, then whispered, "Still here." And in that silence, a breeze moved through the room, software cool, the bell above the door, silent for years, gave one small chime. Just one. But it was enough. She smiled and stepped out into the morning. Shoes soft beneath her, heart quieter than it had been in years. And somewhere, beneath the waking sky, the rhythm of the shoemaker's hands carried on. Not in sound, not in sight, but in the quiet steps of those who had once been mended.
And now, for the next story.
In a small garden behind a weathered house, there hung a wind chime made of 5 hollow bells. It was old, brass mostly, threaded with fading silk cords that swayed when the wind remembered them. Most days it was silent, still, asleep in the stillness of the air. But when the wind passed through, a soft breath, a sudden sigh, the bells would sing as though they'd been waiting to speak all along. A gentle, broken music, like water remembering how to fall. The woman who lived there was quiet too. She tended the moss with slow hands. She swept the stones without hurrying. And every morning before tea she would touch the wind chime gently and say, "Still here." That was all. Just that. As if reminding it and herself that presence did not always require motion. One day, as the woman sipped her tea, a small sparrow landed on the stone railing beside the wind chime. It tilted its head, hopped closer, then again, until it was perched on the thin wooden rod beneath the center bell. The wind did not stir, the chime did not ring, but the bird stayed. For minutes, for hours, watching the garden, watching the stillness, as if waiting for a kind of music that could not be heard with ears. The sparrow came again the next day, and the day after that, always at the same hour, just after the woman's tea had cooled enough to sip in silence. She began to expect it, not with excitement, but with the calm welcome of a leaf greeting rain. The bird never chirped, never flapped, just landed softly and sat. Sometimes on the railing, sometimes on the chime's base, once even atop the center bell. It never made a sound, and neither did the wind, but the woman smiled. There was something in their quiet companionship that felt whole. Some afternoons she would sit beside the wind chime and the bird together, eyes closed, hands still. She didn't speak. She didn't need to, because in the hush between them there was a kind of conversation that only still things can share. One morning she left a few grains of millet on the stone ledge. The bird looked at them, but did not eat. It simply tilted its head again, watching her with one black eye, as if the offering had already been received the moment it was given. The wind remained still, the chimes untouched, and yet each day felt fuller than the one before. Not louder, not brighter, just deeper. The kind of depth that doesn't call attention to itself. Like the quiet in a teacup after the last sip. On the seventh day, the wind returned. It came gently, like an old friend stepping softly into a room it once knew well. The leaves stirred, the tea steam leaned, and the wind chimes swayed, just slightly. The sparrow was already there, perched as always, still as a thought not yet spoken. And then a single bell rang, software clear, lonely in the most beautiful way. The sparrow didn't fly. It remained still, eyes closed as if listening to something only the wind could sing. Then another bell. Then two together, a low harmony, unrehearsed, unfinished, perfect. The woman stood by the door, watching, hands folded, eyes soft. She did not cry, but something inside her did. Not sadness, not joy, something older than both. The sparrow tilted its head again, once, slowly, and took flight. Not fast, not far, just high enough to catch the breeze and ride it through the open air like a note returning to its source. The bells rang once more, all five this time, not loud, not long, just enough. Then silence, but not the old kind, not the kind that waits. This silence was full, like a bowl once filled, now emptied with grace. The woman bowed to the chime, then to the sky, then to the small space where the bird had always sat. She whispered, "Thank you for waiting." The sparrow did not return the next day, nor the one after that. The railing remained bare, the chime hung still, the wind had moved on. And yet the garden felt unchanged, no less alive, no less quiet. In fact, the quiet now carried a sound the woman had never heard before, not in her ears, but in her chest, in her breath, a kind of music left behind like footprints in morning dew. She still placed millet on the stone ledge. Though it remained untouched, she still whispered, "Still here," each morning to the chime, her voice softer now, less out of habit, more out of reverence. One evening she sat in the garden as the sky turned to ink and stars began to poke through the dusk like lanterns. The wind chime moved, barely, a hush of metal on metal, no bird, no gust, just memory. And that too was enough. The woman closed her eyes, listened, and smiled, because she understood now that the bird had never needed to sing to be heard, and the wind had never needed to blow to be felt. Some things, the truest things, leave behind no mark, but they remain. in stillness, in silence, in the spaces we once shared. And so the chime stayed, the wind returned when it wished. And sometimes, on quiet mornings, if you listened just right, you could hear the memory of feathers brushing softly against the rim of a bell, reminding you that not all goodbyes are departures. Some are simply echoes that choose to stay.
And now, for the next story.
At the edge of the old mountain temple, just before the path turned to stone, there sat a single ceramic bowl. It was small, unadorned, plain in a way that made it difficult to look away. Each morning, a young monk would rise with the sun, walk barefoot to the outer gate, and place the bowl carefully on a flat stone. Then he would bow once, not deeply, but with quiet attention, and walk back inside without a word. The bowl remained there all day, and all night, always empty. It was never guarded, never explained, and yet it was never touched. Travelers saw it, villagers passed by it, birds sometimes perched on its rim, but no one dared move it, no one filled it, no one turned it over to see what lay beneath, because somehow that emptiness felt sacred, as if something unseen rested within it, something not meant to be disturbed. Years passed, seasons changed, the bowl stayed, rain collected in it, dried, snow fell in it, melted, leaves curled inside, were blown away again. Still the monk returned, every morning without fail, placed it gently, bowed, and left, until one morning he didn't. The next morning the bowl was still there, but the monk was not. No footsteps on the path, no soft breath in the air, no motion by the gate, just silence and the bowl. A traveller came that day, dust on her robe, wind in her sleeves, and a look in her eyes that said she had been searching for something not found in maps. She saw the bowl, paused, waited, then sat beside it. She didn't touch it. She didn't speak. She simply breathed with it, slow, even, present. Hours passed, the wind shifted, the sun moved like a lantern across the sky. Still she sat, and as dusk began to gather its light, she reached into her satchel and removed nothing, just her hand, empty, open, steady. She held it above the bowl as though about to give something. Then she let it hover there, still, unmoving, and then withdrew it. Gently, she placed both hands on her knees, bowed to the bowl, and stood. No words, no offering, no explanation, but something had changed. Not in the bowl, not in the air, but in the silence between. When the stars rose, they seemed to linger longer above the temple gate. When the moon crested the trees, its light curled itself into the curve of the bowl, as if drawn there on purpose. And from the shadows an old monk watched. Not the young one, someone older, softer. He smiled and said to no one, "At last, someone has understood." The next morning, someone left a stone, Not a precious one, just smooth, warmed slightly by the sun. They placed it gently in the bowl and bowed, not deeply, but with care. The day after, a child left a single feather, white, software barely moving in the breeze. Then came a folded poem, a pressed flower, a coin rubbed thin from years of touch. The bowl remained mostly empty, but now and then something would appear. Never too much, never at once. Only what felt right to leave and light enough to carry in. No one spoke of it. No sign was posted. No rule was given. But word began to spread, not through mouths but through motion, through presence. The bowl had become something more than a vessel. It had become a mirror. People came, not to take, but to notice, not to give out of duty, but to share out of stillness. They left behind what they no longer needed, what weighed them down, what reminded them they were still carrying stories that had already ended, and in return, they left lighter, not happier, not louder, but quieter inside, as if they'd set something down and walked away with a little more space to breathe. Still, no one guarded the bowl. No one claimed it. It was never full, it was never empty. It simply was. One night, under a sky without stars, an elderly man approached the temple gate. His steps were slow, measured, as though each footfall was remembering something. He carried nothing, no bag, no gift, not even a walking stick, only his breath and the weight of a life lived long and wide. He stopped before the bowl, looked at it for a while, then sat down beside it and closed his eyes. He didn't move. He didn't speak. Hours passed. The night deepened. The wind cooled. But still, he sat. At dawn, when the first bird called and the temple bell hummed its low morning tone, he opened his eyes and reached inside the bowl, not to place something in, but to feel what was already there. He touched the feather, the coin, the poem, the silence. Then he bowed, deeply, fully, like a tree leaning into winter. And with that, he whispered something into the bowl. So soft, the wind itself leaned in to listen. No one heard the words, not even the birds. But something in the air shifted. The bowl was still empty, and yet it held everything. The sorrows that had been laid down, the joys left behind, the quiet intentions wrapped in petals and stone. That day, the monks moved the bowl slightly inward, on to the first step of the temple path, not to hide it, but to honor it. A new bowl was placed at the gate, smaller, simpler, waiting, and the first to see it was not a monk, nor a traveler, but the wind. It paused there just long enough to rustle the rim, as if to say, this too shall be filled by the beauty of what cannot be held.
And now, for the next story.
At the edge of the village, past the last row of plum trees, there was a small clearing where nothing much ever happened. The grass grew in quiet waves. The earth held few stones. Even the birds seemed to pass it by without singing. And then one spring, a man arrived with wood. He brought no cart, no tools, only a bundle of planks strapped to his back, and a look in his eyes that spoke of something not yet seen. He did not ask permission. He did not announce his purpose. He simply began building a bridge. But here's the thing, there was no river, no stream, no cliff, no gap to cross, just grass. He laid the planks with great care, tapping them into place with a smooth stone. Each day the bridge grew longer. Each night he sat quietly beside it, watching the sky change colours without ever looking away. By the 7th day, a small group had gathered from the village. Some watched in silence. Some laughed. Others began to whisper. "He's gone mad," one said. "There's nothing to cross here." "Maybe he's waiting for a river to come," another joked. But the man kept building, plank after plank, with slow, steady hands, until finally the bridge stood complete, 12 paces long, raised slightly above the grass, leading nowhere. And then he stopped for days. No one crossed the bridge. Why would they? It began in grass and ended in grass. No road, no destination, just a quiet arc of wood in a place that had never needed one. Children came to play near it, but were warned not to climb. Elders walked past it slowly, squinting as though a purpose might reveal itself if stared at long enough. One morning, a monk from the hill temple arrived. He stood at one end of the bridge, hands folded behind his back, and said, "You've built something quite unusual." The man nodded. "Do you plan to move it somewhere?" "No," the builder replied. "It belongs here." The monk smiled politely, waiting for more. When no explanation came, he asked again, "But what is it for?" The builder looked at the bridge, then at the grass, then at the monk. "To cross," he said. "But to cross to where?" The builder paused, then answered, "That depends on who you are when you step on, and who you are when you step off." The monk didn't reply. He stood still for a long while, then bowed and walked away without ever placing a foot on the wood. That night, the man lit a single lantern at the base of the bridge and sat beside it as he always did. He did not guard it, he did not wait. He simply sat. As the wind moved gently through the tall grass and the moon rose like a question, no longer needing an answer. It happened quietly, as most true things do. An old woman came just after sunrise, carrying a small bundle of herbs wrapped in cloth. She did not speak. She did not hesitate. She stepped onto the bridge as though she'd always known it was there. The wood creaked gently under her feet. The breeze moved with her. And though she crossed in no more than 12 paces, something shifted. She stood at the other end for a long time, then sat down in the grass, facing back toward the bridge, as though looking at something she'd just left behind. That afternoon, a boy came running, barefoot, breathless. He stopped at the foot of the bridge, looked around, and crossed with a single joyful leap. When he reached the far side, he didn't run again. He walked, slower, lighter, as though something had been left behind that didn't need to be carried anymore. And so it began, one by one, a traveller, a widow, a farmer with his hat in his hands. They crossed the bridge not to go somewhere new, but to meet something already waiting. No toll, no signs, no words, just the sound of footsteps on warm wood and the silence that followed each one. And the builder, he remained where he always was, at the edge, beside the lantern, watching without asking, listening without speaking, smiling sometimes, but only when the wind moved just right through the grain of the wood. Seasons passed, the grass grew tall, then yellowed, then bowed beneath the snow. And still, the bridge remained. It aged without aging. It creaked but did not crack. It stood but did not shift. People still came, not every day, but often enough that the wood grew smooth under the quiet rhythm of footsteps. Sometimes they crossed alone, sometimes in pairs, sometimes in silence. They met eyes with others midway across and nodded as if passing through a shared dream. The villagers no longer questioned its purpose. Children no longer laughed. Even the birds began to pause on its railings, resting their wings before continuing their invisible paths. And the builder, one day, he was simply gone. No goodbye, no note, just the empty lantern at the bridge's foot and the faint scent of pine smoke in the air. Some said he had gone to find a river worthy of his next bridge. Others believed he had walked across his own creation and never returned. But the bridge, it stayed. Through wind, through frost, through everything, and those who crossed it never forgot the feeling, though few could name it. Not peace, not healing, not understanding. Something quieter than all of that, like the weight of a question that no longer needs answering. And so it was, that a bridge which led nowhere began to take the people exactly where they needed to go.
And now, for the next story.
There was a man who never slept beneath a roof. Each evening, as the village prepared for rest, he would carry a small mat, a folded blanket, and a weathered lantern to the edge of the garden behind the old tea house. He would lay his mat carefully on the cool ground, just beyond the shadow of the last cypress tree, where the moss was soft and the sky opened wide. When asked why he slept outside, even in the cool of autumn, even when the mist curled low over the grass, he would smile gently and say only this: "The moon dreams better when someone is listening." The villagers had long since stopped asking questions. Children whispered stories about him. Some said he was a monk who'd forgotten his temple. Others believed he could hear the moon speak, but the man never explained. He simply unrolled his mat each night, lit his lantern with a single breath, and lay beneath the open sky as though it were the ceiling of a quiet temple. The moon would rise, sometimes full and golden, sometimes thin as a whisper, and the man would watch until his eyes closed on their own, not with force, not with effort, but like a leaf giving in to the river. Each night, a small surrender. Each night, a gentle return to stillness. One night, In the middle of the 7th month, a wind arrived earlier than usual. It came not with force, but with intention, cool, steady, like a long exhale from the mountain. The man lit his lantern as always, but the flame danced differently. It leaned, it flickered, it bowed, as though it too were listening. He didn't mind. He placed the lantern beside him and laid back on the mat, his hands resting softly on his chest, his breath slow and without rhythm. The wind moved through the garden like a careful hand through tall grass. The trees didn't rustle, they breathed. Above him, the moon emerged slowly from behind a bank of soft clouds, round, quiet, and impossibly clear. He did not stare at it. He let it be, just as he let the night be, and the wind, and the distant sounds of frogs calling across the stream. There was no need to reach for peace. It had already arrived. Moments passed, or perhaps hours. Time had folded in on itself like cloth in a drawer. And then, just as he began to drift, he heard something. Not a word, not a sound, but a kind of presence, a hush with weight to it. He opened his eyes to find the moon staring back, not above, but beside him, low, near, so close he could see its edges blur in the lantern's glow. He smiled, closed his eyes again, and said softly, "I'm still here." The next morning, a young boy from the village came to the garden just as the dew was lifting from the stones. He often visited early, curious about the man who slept without walls. Today he stood quietly at the edge of the moss, watching the figure still lying there, eyes closed, but smiling. After a long silence, the boy finally asked, in a voice barely louder than a breath, "Do you ever get lonely out here by yourself?" The man didn't open his eyes, but he replied, softly, slowly, like a thought unfolding, "Only when I forget I'm not alone." The boy looked around. There was no one else, just trees and stone, and a sky so open it seemed to listen. "But there's no one here," the boy said, "only you and the moon." The man finally opened his eyes. They were not sharp nor distant. They looked as though they had just come in from the wind. "The moon is enough," he said, "and sometimes even that is more company than I need." The boy didn't understand. Not fully, but something about the way the man said it made the question feel less important, like a pebble that no longer needed to be carried. He sat beside the man for a little while longer, watching the breeze move through the tall grass, listening to the silence between birdsong, and for the first time, the quiet didn't feel empty. It felt full. The man continued to sleep in the garden, through spring winds, through autumn rains, through the hush of falling snow. He added no roof, no walls, only a second blanket and a deeper breath. Some nights the moon was hidden, veiled in cloud, gone from sight. But he never waited for it. He lay back just the same, as if the sky were always full even when it appeared empty. The villagers began to call him the listener, not because he spoke little, but because the space around him always felt quieter after he left it. Over time, others began to join him, not to talk, not to ask, but simply to lie down beside the silence and let it settle over them. A teacher came, then a traveler, then a mother with her child. No words were exchanged. Only breath, only stillness. Only the gentle knowing that not all sleep is for rest, and not all silence is empty. One night, many years after the boy's first question, he returned, now older, carrying a mat of his own. He lay beside the old man, who now had more wrinkles than the bark of the tree behind him. As the moon rose, full and silver and still, the man whispered, "Do you hear it?" The boy, now grown, listened closely. There was no sound, no voice, only the rustling of the leaves and the sound of his own breath softening. And he nodded. "Yes," he said, "it's saying nothing." The old man smiled, closed his eyes and whispered, "Exactly." And that night, the moon slept too.
And now, for the next story.
The tea house by the river. Along the gentle curve of a slow, winding river, where water lilies drifted lazily upon the surface and dragonflies traced delicate patterns in the air, there stood a humble tea house. Its wooden beams, darkened and softened by countless seasons of sun, rain, and quiet storms, bore the gentle marks of time. The paper lanterns, hung like silent sentinels beneath the eaves, glowed softly at dusk, casting pools of amber light that danced gently against the fading sky. The tea house was tucked among willows and maples whose branches brushed the river's edge, their leaves whispering in the soft evening breeze. The air here was thick with the delicate fragrance of jasmine and the faint, calming trace of sandalwood incense that curled upward in slow, curling tendrils. Inside, the tatami mats were cool beneath bare feet, worn smooth by the footsteps of many who had come seeking quiet and solace. Sliding shoji doors framed views of the river's serene flow and moss-covered stones that stood like silent guardians along the banks. This place was tended by Hana, a quiet woman who moved with a calm and deliberate grace, as if each gesture was part of an ancient ritual. She prepared tea not just to serve a drink, but to offer a sanctuary, a moment of stillness in a world that often rushed by with clattering noise and fleeting moments. Her hands, slender and steady, worked with gentle precision, warming the teapot, selecting the finest leaves, pouring water heated to the perfect temperature, and watching as the fragrant steam rose in soft, ephemeral clouds. One evening, as the sun dipped low behind distant misted mountains and painted the sky with colours of rose and gold, a traveller arrived at the tea house. His journey had been long, filled with winding paths and restless nights when sleep seemed just out of reach. His eyes held the weariness of one who carries too many thoughts, like stones weighing heavy in a pocket. Drawn by the soft glow and quiet promise, he stepped inside the tea house and the world outside seemed to fall away like a forgotten dream. Hana greeted him with a gentle bow, her smile warm yet reserved. She invited him to sit by the window where the river's slow current shimmered beneath the fading light. Here the outside world was softened to a gentle murmur, a perfect place to rest. As Hana prepared the tea, her movements slowed to a ritual rhythm. Water was poured carefully over the fragrant leaves, steam curling upward like a delicate veil rising from the earth. The soft clink of the teapot lid, the gentle swish of water stirring leaves, and the distant song of crickets blended into a lullaby that floated between moments, inviting the traveller to breathe deeper, to listen closer, to simply be. When the tea was ready, Hana offered the cup with both hands, eyes meeting his with a quiet invitation. This was not just tea, but a vessel of calm, a bridge to stillness. The traveller took the cup slowly, feeling the warmth seep into his palms, the rich aroma rising like a gentle tide to meet him. The first sip was soft and soothing, a balance of bitter and sweet, warm and comforting all at once. The warmth settled inside him, and a softness began to unfold, a gentle opening in the tight weave of tension and thought. He turned his gaze toward the river, watching as it curved slowly and steadily, flowing without hurry or struggle, embracing every stone and bend with grace. Hana's voice, soft as the evening breeze, broke the silence. "The river does not rush to reach the sea," she said. "It flows in its own time, carrying all things gently along. Like the river, your journey unfolds, not hurried, not forced, but patient and enough." The traveller closed his eyes, letting the warmth of the tea and the quiet rhythm of the river wash over him. He imagined himself as part of that gentle flow, carried by the current of time, softening against the stones of life's challenges. In the stillness, a question drifted like a leaf slowly floating downstream. What if peace is not found by chasing, but by allowing yourself to flow? The night deepened around the tea house, stars appearing one by one like distant lanterns suspended in the vast sky above. The paper lanterns flickered gently, their light a small, steady beacon in the calm darkness. The air was cool and fresh, carrying the scent of damp earth and blooming night flowers. The traveller sat a while longer, wrapped in quietude, feeling the gentle pulse of the river's timeless rhythm echo within him. When it was time to leave, Hana's words lingered softly like a whispered blessing. "May your journey be like the river, steady, patient, and guided by the light within." As he stepped back onto the path by the riverbank, the traveller carried with him not just the memory of tea and warmth, but a quiet question to rest upon his heart. How might your own journey flow if you trust its slow and steady course?
And now, for the next story.
The Mountain Path. High in the quiet folds of the ancient mountains, where the air is crisp and thin and clouds drift like drifting dreams, there is a narrow path carved gently into the hillside. This path, woven from earth and stone, is worn smooth by the footsteps of countless wanderers, seeking not only a journey outward, but a journey inward, a quiet pilgrimage through stillness and reflection. One soft morning, as the delicate light of dawn spilled over the jagged peaks like liquid gold, a solitary traveller set out along this mountain path. Cloaked in muted earth tones, he moved slowly, each step measured and mindful, as though listening to the silent song of the stones beneath his feet. Around him, the world was hushed. Towering pines stood sentinel, their needles whispering ancient secrets to the gentle breeze. The scent of damp moss, wild herbs and cold mountain air hung thick and fresh, mingling with the distant murmur of a hidden stream weaving through the valley below. The mountain itself seemed to breathe in time with the traveller, its silence a living presence, both vast and intimate, holding space for stillness and movement alike. As he walked, the traveller noticed how the path curved and bent softly, sometimes revealing sudden vistas, a silver ribbon of river far below, clouds drifting lazily through the valleys, and shy alpine flowers blooming in delicate clusters beside the stones. Each scene was a quiet reminder of the vastness of the world, the mystery of the sky, and the smallness of his own restless worries. He paused beneath an ancient cedar tree, its roots twisted and gnarled like the fingers of time itself, clutching the earth with steady strength. Placing his hand against the rough bark, he felt the steady heartbeat of the tree beneath his palm, solid, enduring, and deeply rooted. This tree had stood here through countless seasons, storms and sunrises, snowfalls and springs, rooted yet flexible, firm yet yielding. In this moment, the traveller felt the mountain's quiet wisdom seep into him, that true strength is found not in resistance, but in gentle acceptance of life's inevitable currents. He resumed his journey, his steps now a quiet prayer, a meditation in motion. The path rose steeply at times, inviting effort and endurance, then flattened gently, allowing ease and rest. The traveller learned to move with the rhythm of the mountain, to embrace the challenge without hurry, to rest without guilt or haste. The air was filled with soft sounds, the distant call of a lone hawk, the rustle of wind through needles and leaves, the faint drip of melting snow from high crags. Each sound blended into a harmonious symphony of quiet presence. The traveller's breath deepened, slow and steady, in tune with the world around him. He noticed the texture of the path beneath his feet, the rough, crumbly earth mixed with smooth river stones warmed faintly by the rising sun. Sometimes his toes sank slightly into soft patches of moss, lush and cool as velvet. The scent of earth and pine filled his lungs with every inhale, grounding him more deeply in the moment. Along the way, he found a cluster of delicate wildflowers, tiny, pale blossoms nodding gently in the breeze. Their fragile beauty seemed to speak softly of impermanence and grace, reminding him that even the smallest things hold profound meaning. Eventually, he reached a small clearing bathed in golden sunlight. The warmth was gentle, spreading softly across his skin like a whispered caress. Here stood a smooth stone seat worn by the passage of countless travelers before him. He settled down quietly, folding his hands loosely in his lap and closing his eyes. The silence wrapped around him like a soft cloak, a sacred space where time seemed to slow and stretch. He breathed deeply, the pure mountain air filling his lungs like a balm for weary thoughts. As he sat, he felt the slow unfolding of peace within, a spaciousness growing like the first gentle light of dawn inside his chest. A question arose in the quiet, a soft, still inquiry as delicate as the rustle of pine needles. What if the path itself is the destination, and every single step you take is already enough? The traveller remained there, letting the mountain's quiet embrace hold him. Clouds drifted lazily overhead, their shapes shifting like slow-moving dreams. The sun warmed his face, the cool breeze whispered through the trees, and the world felt vast and tender, inviting him to rest fully into the present. Time seemed to lose meaning as he sat in that sacred stillness, feeling his heart slow, his mind soften, and a gentle clarity settle deep within. When at last he rose to continue, the mountain whispered a last blessing on the wind. May you walk your path with patience and presence, knowing that each step you take carries you gently home. As the traveller disappeared into the soft curves of the hillside, the question lingered softly in the air, an invitation meant for you. Now resting here in this quiet moment, how might you walk your own path, embracing each step as a quiet gift?
And now, for the next story.
The Lantern Festival. In a small village nestled gently between rolling hills and the quiet bend of a slow-moving river, the night air was alive with soft anticipation. The eve of the Lantern Festival had come, a sacred night when the ordinary world seemed to shimmer, and the sky itself appeared to open like a deep, indigo blossom sprinkled with thousands of distant stars. The air was cool and fragrant, carrying the delicate perfume of blooming cherry blossoms mingled with the sweet, smoky tendrils of sandalwood incense burning quietly in the little shrines scattered along the village paths. Narrow streets lined with wooden houses whose shutters had been carefully opened glowed warmly with hundreds of paper lanterns. These lanterns, painted in gentle reds, soft golds and whispers of pale ivory, flickered tenderly in the evening breeze, casting dancing pools of amber light that played upon worn cobblestones and weathered door frames. The village was alive yet hushed in reverence, as if all had been drawn together by some invisible thread, woven through centuries of shared stories and quiet celebrations. The faint murmur of whispered conversations, the gentle rustle of silk robes, and the distant chime of temple bells floated softly on the night air. Among the villagers was May, the elder storyteller whose voice was like a soothing stream flowing through the stillness. Children, wide-eyed and wrapped in soft shawls, gathered closely around the crackling communal fire. The flames flickered and spat sparks that rose like tiny, fleeting stars into the dark above. May's voice began to weave a tale, slow and deliberate, each word a smooth stone cast gently onto the surface of a calm pond. Her story spoke of a special lantern unlike any other, a lantern said to hold a light born not of flame or oil, but from the very heart of the night itself. This light was soft and steady, a quiet glow that could calm the most restless mind and soothe the deepest weariness. It was said to reside deep within the ancient forest beyond the village, hidden among the towering bamboo and moss-covered stones, where only those who had already found a calm peace within could glimpse it. The children listened closely, their faces lit by the flickering firelight and the warm glow of lanterns all around. May described how many seekers had ventured into the forest, drawn by the legend, only to find that the lantern's light did not shine outward for all to see. Instead, it revealed itself gently to those who carried the quiet flame inside, their own stillness, their own patience, and their own silent knowing. As the story unfolded, the villagers rose one by one, each holding a lantern carefully crafted by their own hands. With gentle reverence, they lit the wicks and released their lanterns into the evening sky. One by one, the lanterns lifted upward, like glowing blossoms drifting slowly on a dark sea. They rose higher and higher until their soft lights joined the stars above, weaving a tapestry of gentle radiance, stretching to infinity. The children's eyes followed the lanterns wide with wonder, their breaths shallow and soft. A warm calm settled over the gathering, a silent invitation to rest, to release, to be present. May's voice, now softer and almost a whisper, invited all to imagine the gentle light of their own inner lantern, the quiet presence within that could guide them through darkness without struggle or strain. She spoke of how this light was always there, waiting patiently, glowing steadily, even when the world outside felt uncertain or harsh. The night deepened, and the lanterns floated higher still, becoming tiny specks of hope against the vast velvet sky. The village held its breath in reverent stillness, wrapped in the embrace of the festival's peaceful mystery. Finally, as the last lantern disappeared into the infinite expanse, May's final words floated softly into the hearts of all who listened, like a gentle breeze over a still lake. What if the light you seek has already been glowing quietly within you all along? And so, beneath the endless sky and among the drifting lanterns, the village breathed in the calm, the mystery, and the deep, soothing peace of the night. Each soul, touched by the festival's gentle magic, carried that quiet light into their dreams, where it would burn softly through the night, steady, serene, and whole.
And now, for the next story.
The Whispering Bamboo Grove. Far beyond the bustling towns and winding rivers, nestled quietly in the gentle embrace of rolling hills and ancient forests, there lies a grove of bamboo, a sanctuary untouched by time, a place where the world slows its breath and invites the heart to listen deeply. This grove, hidden from maps and guides, is said to hold a soft magic, woven from the whispers of the wind and the shimmering dance of sunlight filtering through slender green stalks. It is a realm where silence is alive, and every leaf, every breeze, every shadow carries a secret waiting to be heard. One late afternoon, when the sun was a low, warm orb slipping behind distant mountain peaks, a young seeker named Hana arrived at the edge of this sacred grove. Her heart was heavy with the noise of the world, restless thoughts, endless expectations, and a quiet yearning for stillness that had long eluded her. She stepped slowly beneath the towering bamboo stalks, each movement deliberate, as if honoring the sacredness of the space she entered. The air shifted immediately, cooler now, perfumed with the crisp scent of fresh green leaves and the earthy richness of soil softened by recent rain. Hana's footsteps were gentle upon the soft carpet of fallen leaves and delicate shoots, the sound almost swallowed by the hush that surrounded her. Above, the bamboo swayed gracefully, their smooth stems brushing softly against one another, creating a delicate symphony, a rhythmic whisper that seemed to speak in a language older than words. With every breath, Hana felt herself drawn deeper into the grove's embrace. The sunlight poured down in scattered pools of jade-green light, dappling her skin with shifting patterns that played like liquid silk. The shadows moved slowly, flowing with the sway of the bamboo, casting gentle shapes that seemed to breathe and pulse with the quiet life of the forest. As she wandered, Hana noticed the bamboo's gentle inclination, how the stalks leaned subtly toward each other and toward her as if sharing an ancient secret carried on the wind. The rustling sound was not mere noise. It was a voice, not heard by the ears but felt deeply within, the voice of the grove itself, calling her to listen beyond words, to receive the wisdom held in silence. At the heart of the grove, a small clearing opened, a sacred space bathed in warm sunlight that fell like liquid gold. In the center stood a single bamboo shoot, young and vibrant, reaching straight and proud toward the sky. Hana knelt beside it, running her fingers along its smooth, cool stem, feeling the steady pulse of life within. It was a quiet strength, humble yet unyielding, alive with the energy of growth and possibility. In this stillness, a profound understanding blossomed within her. The bamboo's lesson was clear. True strength is not rigid or unbending, but flexible and fluid. Like bamboo, we survive storms not by resisting, but by bending, yielding softly to the winds that threaten to break us, and rising again with grace and resilience. This strength, born of surrender, was quiet but powerful, rooted deeply in the earth and reaching gently toward the sky. Hana settled into the warm earth, folding her hands loosely in her lap, and closed her eyes. She let the grove's calm fill her completely, The whispering leaves, the soft hum of the wind, the distant call of a solitary bird settling into the evening. The bamboo's ancient lullaby wove through the air, a gentle breath of peace that slowed her heartbeat and softened her mind. Time stretched, slow and infinite, as Hannah breathed in rhythm with the grove. She felt her thoughts untangle, loosen and dissolve like mist at dawn. Her worries, once tangled knots, now drifted away on the wind, leaving behind a spacious quiet, a vast and gentle stillness that welcomed her fully. As twilight deepened, the grove grew more hushed, the last rays of sun slipping away behind the hills. Hannah rose slowly, carrying with her the quiet wisdom of the bamboo, the strength found in gentle surrender, the resilience born from silent flexibility. Walking back through the grove, the shadows lengthened, and the bamboo whispered its final blessing upon her journey. A soft question, like the rustle of leaves in the breeze, settled into her heart. How might you learn to bend with life's winds, finding strength not in resistance, but in the tender grace of surrender? And as she disappeared beyond the grove's edge, the bamboo continued its ancient song, a slow, steady breath weaving through the world, inviting all who listen to discover the quiet power that lives within.
And now, for the next story.
The mountain hermit's silence. High above the rolling valleys and whispering forests, where the air thins and breath comes soft and slow, there lies a solitary hermitage carved gently into the granite face of an ancient mountain. The hermit who dwells there has lived a life wrapped in silence, a silence so profound that he is said to have spoken only once in 50 years. His quiet presence is a language beyond words, a deep and steady current of calm that flows beneath the surface of everything. The path leading to the hermitage winds like a silver thread through groves of ancient pine trees, whose needles glisten softly in the filtered light, murmuring secrets to the breeze. It climbs steeply over weathered stones, worn smooth by centuries of wind and rain, each step a slow meditation as the traveller ascends further away from the noisy world below. On one still morning, just as dawn was melting into pale gold and pink across the sky, a traveller named Kai began his journey up this path. His heart was a tangle of restless thoughts and unanswered questions, a mind weary from chasing meaning in the loud clamour of life. With deliberate steps he moved slowly forward, breathing deeply the crisp, fragrant air, each inhale filled with the scent of pine and fresh earth, each exhale releasing a little more of the tension he carried. As Kai climbed higher, the familiar world grew distant and small beneath him. The chatter of towns, the rush of rivers, the distant calls of birds faded into a muted silence that felt like a soft cloak wrapped around his shoulders. The mountain itself seemed to pause, holding its breath in reverence for what lay ahead. Finally, Kai reached a narrow ledge where the hermitage sat quietly, a simple wooden cabin nestled against the granite cliff, its weathered beams touched by lichen and moss. Outside, on a smooth stone bench carved from the mountain itself, the hermit sat with eyes closed, his face serene and still as a deep, undisturbed lake. Kai approached without a word, settling down gently on a nearby rock, feeling the cool stone beneath him and the steady rhythm of the earth. Between them stretched a silence, not empty but full, thick with presence and calm. It was the kind of silence that speaks without speaking, that holds space without needing to fill it. Time unfolded slowly there, a seamless flow without beginning or end. The pine needles whispered softly overhead, a gentle rustle like the breath of the mountain itself. The sun shifted across the sky, casting long shadows that danced quietly on the rocks. Kai felt his own breath slow, deepening into a peaceful rhythm that matched the steady pulse of the earth beneath him. As the hours drifted by, Kai's restless thoughts began to untangle, loosen and dissolve like morning mist warmed by sunlight. The questions he had carried so tightly faded into a gentle curiosity, an openness to whatever might come in the stillness. In the late afternoon, as the sky softened into hues of lavender and rose, the hermit's eyes slowly opened. He looked at Kai with a gaze both tender and profound, a quiet invitation woven into the very silence between them. Then, with a voice soft and deliberate, the hermit spoke a single word that seemed to echo through the still air. Listen. Kai nodded, understanding in that moment that the deepest wisdom is not found in words spoken aloud, but in the silence that surrounds them, the space where the soul can rest, where the heart can hear its own quiet truth. He rose slowly, the weight of the mountain's calm settling into his bones like a gentle song. As he began his descent, the hermit's silent teaching followed him. A whisper carried on the wind, a reminder that sometimes the greatest voice is found in stillness, and peace is waiting in the quiet places we often overlook. The path stretched before him, shaded by towering pines that swayed softly with the breeze, their needles sparkling like emerald stars in the fading light. The air was cool and sweet, filled with the faint scent of cedar and moss, and the distant call of a solitary bird echoed gently through the valley. With each step down the mountain, Kai felt the hermit's presence within, a calm shadow, a silent friend. The questions that once crowded his mind now rested peacefully, held in the gentle embrace of stillness. And so, beneath the vast, endless sky and among the ancient trees, Kai carried the hermit's gift quietly in his heart. A soft, lingering question stirred there, like a leaf floating on a slow stream. What might you hear if you simply listen to the silence within and to the world breathing softly around you?
And now, for the next story.
The Quiet Tea House. Nestled deep within a misty valley, where soft clouds drift lazily among rolling hills carpeted with emerald moss and wildflowers, there stands a tea house unlike any other. It is small and unassuming, its wooden beams weathered and worn smooth by the gentle hands of time, its paper windows glowing faintly with the warm light of countless quiet evenings spent in thoughtful stillness. Here the world slows its hurried breath, and every moment becomes a gentle invitation to pause, to breathe deeply, and to taste the subtle sweetness of true stillness. The tea house rests quietly beside a slow, winding river whose waters move like liquid glass over smooth stones, mirroring the delicate dance of cherry blossoms drifting lazily on its surface. Each dawn the mist rises like a silken curtain, wrapping the valley in a soft hush that seems to hold the whispered secrets of the earth itself. The faint, earthy scent of damp soil mingles with the sweet fragrance of blooming jasmine and the fresh green of spring leaves, filling the air with a quiet invitation to surrender to the present. One spring morning, as the world stirred gently awake beneath a pale sky brushed with strokes of rose and gold, a traveller named May found herself walking softly along the moss-covered path that led to this sanctuary. Her footsteps were light, careful not to disturb the tender stillness that embraced the land. She was drawn here not by fame or fortune, but by a quiet yearning, a desire to find a place untouched by haste, where the simple act of drinking tea might become a meditation, a sacred art of being fully present in the moment. As May crossed the threshold and stepped inside, a warm, inviting scent of roasted tea leaves and freshly steamed water wrapped around her like a comforting shawl. The room was simple and serene. Tatami mats woven finely beneath her feet, a low wooden table polished to a soft sheen by the hands of generations, and shelves lined with delicate porcelain cups and teapots shaped by artisans who understood the delicate harmony of form, function, and beauty. She settled herself quietly onto the mat, the soft rustle of her kimono blending harmoniously with the gentle crackle of the hearth's fire. Across from her, the tea master, a graceful elderly woman whose eyes reflected the calm stillness of a mountain lake, moved with a slow, deliberate grace. Each movement was a quiet poem of mindfulness, the gentle clink of the kettle as it was lifted, the precise pouring of steaming water over fragrant leaves, the curl of rising steam like a silent prayer dissolving into the still air. May watched, captivated as the ritual unfolded. She felt her breath lengthen and deepen, her mind softening like the petals of a flower opening to the morning sun. When the tea master finally placed the small cup before her, warm and fragrant in her hands, May lifted it slowly to her lips. The flavor was subtle and profound, a delicate bitterness softened by a whisper of sweetness, unfolding slowly, like a secret whispered only to those who truly listen. As May sipped, the world outside the tea house faded into a distant hum, a soft backdrop to the deepening silence within. The worries and restless thoughts that had clung to her like shadows began to dissolve, slipping away like petals carried gently downstream. Time stretched and softened, each moment flowing seamlessly into the next, a continuous thread of calm, clarity, and gentle presence. The tea master's voice broke the silence at last, soft and tender like a breeze through bamboo leaves. In tea there is stillness. In stillness there is truth. And in truth the heart finds its way home. May closed her eyes and breathed deeply, letting the warmth of the tea seep deep into her being, mingling with the slow rhythm of her breath. She felt the pulse of the earth beneath the tea house, the steady heartbeat of soil, water and stone, and the slow, timeless flow of the river nearby. She felt the soft weight of time's passing, neither hurried nor stagnant, but a gentle unfolding, like a flower blooming in the sun. As the afternoon light softened and the sky blushed with the first hues of twilight, May remained seated in quiet contemplation, carrying the tea's tender wisdom as a flame nestled softly in her heart. Outside, the river's gentle murmur mingled with the distant song of crickets and the rustling of leaves in the evening breeze, weaving a lullaby of peace that reached deep into the soul. She wondered softly, what moments of stillness can you find in your own day? Where can your heart come home to peace? The tea house waited quietly for her answer, a gentle presence beyond words, a sanctuary held safe within the flow of time and breath.
And now, for the next story.
The Quiet Garden. In a small, ancient village nestled between gentle, rolling hills that seemed to cradle the sky itself, there was a garden unlike any other, a secret held softly between the roots of old cedar trees and the quiet whisper of jasmine flowers. The garden's gate was carved from weathered cedar, its wood smooth and worn by decades of wind, rain, and the touch of countless hands. It stood slightly ajar, inviting the curious and the weary alike into a world that seemed to exist just beyond the ordinary flow of time. An old gardener named Aiko lived beside this garden, her house a simple wooden cottage framed by creeping ivy and moss that glistened with morning dew. Each day before dawn had fully stretched her rosy fingers across the sky, Aiko rose and stepped into the garden. Her movements were slow, deliberate, as though she was walking a sacred path rather than merely tending plants. Her hands, gentle and knowing, brushed lightly over fern fronds unfurling like ancient scrolls, moss soft as velvet, and petals that nodded as if they held secrets spoken only in the language of the wind. The garden was a mosaic of greens, soft blues and pale pinks, a living poem of earth and air. It was a place where the noisy bustle of the world outside fell away, replaced by the gentle music of dripping dew, rustling leaves, and the distant soft call of birds awakening to the day. Aiko believed the garden was more than just a collection of plants. It was a sanctuary, a quiet sanctuary where the restless heart could find rest and the noisy mind could find silence. It was a place to slow down, to listen not only to nature's songs but to the silence between those songs, the quiet spaces where true understanding blooms. One misty morning, just as the first rays of sunlight began to filter through the leaves like golden threads, a young man came to the garden's gate. His shoulders were heavy with the burdens of many restless thoughts and sleepless nights. The tension in his face softened the moment he stepped through the gate, as if the garden itself exhaled a welcome that seeped deep into his bones. Aiko met him with a gentle smile, her eyes bright with quiet kindness. She motioned for him to walk slowly with her among the plants, to feel the earth beneath their feet and the coolness of the morning air against their skin. "Why does this garden feel so still?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper, touched with wonder. Aiko led him down a narrow stone path to the heart of the garden, where a small pond lay nestled like a secret. Its surface was smooth and glassy, reflecting the sky and the branches of the whispering trees overhead. Tiny ripples flickered across the water, stirred by a soft breeze that carried the scent of jasmine and damp earth. "The garden listens," she said softly, kneeling beside the pond, "not with ears, but with presence. It does not hurry or rush. It simply is." The young man crouched beside her, gazing into the clear water. He saw his own reflection shimmer and change with every ripple, a delicate dance between stillness and movement. "Is that why I feel calmer here?" he asked, the tension in his voice easing as he spoke. "Yes," Aiko replied gently, "because here you are invited to be still, to breathe deeply, to watch without judgment, and to rest." They sat together by the pond, the world quiet except for the soft rustling of leaves and the faint drip of dew falling from the branches. The air was cool and fragrant, and the calm seemed to settle around them like a soft blanket. "The garden teaches us patience," Aiko said, her voice barely above the breeze. "It teaches us about holding space for growth, even when that growth is slow or unseen." The young man thought of his own mind, often racing ahead like a restless river, filled with worries and desires. Here, in the garden's quiet embrace, he felt a different rhythm, one of gentle unfolding and quiet waiting. "Can I learn to be like this garden?" he asked, looking up at her with hopeful eyes. Aiko smiled, the lines of her face softening in the morning light. "Every day is a chance to plant stillness," she said, "even in the smallest moments, like a seed resting quietly beneath the soil, waiting for the right time to grow." She reached out to touch a tender shoot just emerging from the earth, its tiny leaves unfolding slowly, hesitantly. Growth is not always visible, she continued. Sometimes it is happening deep below the surface, in places we cannot see. And sometimes it is simply the act of waiting, patient, unhurried, open to whatever may come. The young man breathed in the cool, fresh air again, feeling the softness of the moss beneath his hands and the subtle warmth of the sun beginning to rise. A quiet hope stirred in his chest, a seedling of peace growing stronger with each gentle moment. When the sun climbed higher and spilled golden light across the garden, warming the petals and leaves, the young man rose to leave. As he walked back through the gate, the garden seemed to breathe with him. Its quiet blessing carried softly on the breeze. And as he disappeared down the path toward the village, a question lingered in the air like a whispered invitation. What might grow in the quiet spaces you hold?
And now, for the next story.
The Lantern on the Mountain Path. Far beyond the familiar hum of the village, where the air thins and the world widens into quiet vastness, there lies a mountain path that twists and turns beneath towering ancient pines and moss-covered stones. Here the night moves slowly, draped in velvety darkness, where only the faintest glow dares to ripple through the shadows. On this path walks an old traveller named Koji. He carries a lantern, not bright, not brash, but small, steady, a gentle glow that breathes warmth into the cool night air. Its light is soft, trembling like a quiet heartbeat, casting long, wavering shadows that dance and mingle with the ancient trees. Koji's footsteps are deliberate, slow as the steady drip of water off a leaf. Each step seems to carry not just his body, but the weight and lightness of many years, of many journeys both outside and within. The scent of pine is thick and soothing, mixed with the damp earth and the faint, sweet hint of wildflowers sleeping beneath the dark. Somewhere nearby, a brook hums its age-old lullaby, tumbling over smooth stones polished by time. The night air tastes cool on Koji's tongue, sharp with the clarity of stars shining above like silent candles scattered across the black silk of the sky. At a gentle bend in the path where the trees open slightly to reveal a small clearing bathed in silver moonlight, Koji pauses. He lowers the lantern, resting it softly on a mossy stone, careful not to disturb the delicate peace around him. Sitting beside it, he closes his eyes and draws the night into his breath, the coolness of air flowing in, the warmth flowing out. In the quiet of this moment, memories rise slowly like mist. He remembers the words of his teacher, spoken long ago beneath a sky just like this one. The lantern's light does not banish the darkness. It only reveals the path for those who choose to walk it. The simplicity of these words is a kind of gentle mystery. The darkness is not an enemy to be defeated, but a companion to be understood. The light is not a weapon, but a guide, soft, humble, persistent. Opening his eyes, Koji gazes down the shadowed trail. The path curves away, disappearing between the thick trunks of ancient pines. The lantern's flame flickers quietly, trembling with the breeze that barely stirs the air. He wonders, is the path truly illuminated by this lantern? Or has the light always been inside the traveller's heart, waiting to be seen? With a slow breath, Koji stands and resumes his walk. The lantern swings gently at his side, its glow steady but modest. The forest breathes with him, the crunch of dry needles underfoot, the soft rustling of unseen creatures in the brush. the distant call of an owl, all become part of a gentle symphony. His own breath is a slow wave rising and falling, a reminder of life flowing steadily through stillness. Halfway along the path, Koji notices a young woman seated on a fallen log, her eyes closed in calm repose. Her face holds a serene quiet that draws him near. She opens her eyes when he approaches, their deep brown depths reflecting the lantern's glow. "Why do you carry the lantern?" she asks softly. "To find my way," Koji answers. "But the path is dark," she says, "and the light seems so small." Koji smiles with the warmth of understanding. It is enough. She looks at him thoughtfully, as if weighing the truth of this simple statement. "Sometimes," Koji continues, "the smallest light holds the deepest truth." They sit together in silence, the forest cradling them in its tender embrace. As moments stretch, the woman's expression changes, softening, opening. When she rises to continue, Koji notices a new light in her eyes, a quiet glow that seems to come not from the lantern, but from within. Together they walk the last stretch toward the mountain's peak, where the sky widens like a great ocean overhead. Stars spill across the night in endless constellations, their silver shimmer washing over rocks and trees, bathing the world in ancient light. Koji places the lantern down and stands quietly, feeling the vast stillness settle deep inside him. In this great silence, he understands. The path was never truly dark. The light was never truly small. The path waits for the traveller's steps. The light waits in the traveller's heart. The lantern's glow becomes a question, flickering gently in the night. When the world fades to shadow, where does your light come from? When all else is silent, what guides your way? The mountain holds no answers, only space. Space to rest, to wonder, to simply be. And in this space, the traveller finds a calm deeper than words, a knowing quieter than thought. So, when you feel lost in the dark, remember the mountain path. Remember the gentle glow that need not banish night, only reveal the next step. And listen for the light within you, always waiting to be seen.
And now, for the next story.
The Bell Beyond Sound. In a forgotten valley nestled between folded hills and whispering ridges, where clouds often touched the earth and stayed for tea, there stood a humble temple. No grand gate, no golden spires, only a low roof cradled by moss, and wooden walls warmed by years of morning sun and gentle rain. This was the Temple of Silent Pines, where the wind moved slow, as if it too had something to learn. At the heart of the temple courtyard, hanging beneath an arched beam of blackened cedar, was a bell. Not just any bell, this one was ancient, perhaps older than the trees around it. Its surface bore the faded etchings of lotus petals and nameless symbols, worn soft by 1,000 seasons of wind and hands. Each morning before the sun rose fully over the ridge, a young monk named Tenzin would step quietly across the dew-dark stones, his robes brushing the air like a whisper, and strike the bell once. Only once. The sound would rise, slowly at first, like breath gathering, and then bloom, golden and round, spreading into the still air like ripples through a bowl of water, left undisturbed overnight. And in that single note, the valley listened. Birds paused mid-song, leaves stilled. Even the river, which ran not far from the temple's edge, seemed to hush its burble. The villagers in nearby hamlets often paused whatever they were doing, chopping wood, pouring tea, tying bundles of herbs, and turned their ears slightly, not quite knowing why. Tenzan too would listen. He would lower the wooden striker with reverence, return it to its resting place beside the bell, and remain there, motionless. His eyes would close, his chest would soften, and he would wait, not for the sound, but for what came after it. You see, many months ago, on his first winter in the temple, Master Gendo had told him, "The bell's sound is not what you hear, Tenzan. It is what remains after the hearing ends." At the time, the young monk had bowed deeply and whispered, "Yes, Master," as all students do when the lesson is too large to carry all at once. But he did not yet understand. And so each day he struck the bell, and each day he listened, not just with his ears, but with his body, with his breath, with his wondering. And yet, understanding did not come. Weeks became months. The trees turned their colors and let them go. The temple fox disappeared for a while and returned with thinner fur. Rain soaked the stone paths into mirrors, and the scent of wood smoke filled the halls. Still, the bell rang. Still, Tenzan listened, and still the silence after felt just empty. Not full, as Master Gendo had hinted. Not wholly, until one morning. It was late spring. A fog lay heavy in the valley, so thick that the temple's outer garden vanished into pale nothingness. The stones beneath Tenzan's feet were slick with mist, and his breath left no trace in the chilled air. He bowed to the bell, raised the striker, and let it fall, gently, with the weight of surrender. But the sound did not rise as before. It seemed to vanish before it fully formed, swallowed by the fog, absorbed by the quiet. No echo, no lingering hum, just absence. Tenzan stood longer than usual, confusion softening into stillness. A different kind of listening began to grow in him, one that had nothing to do with ears. And then something in him moved, not a thought, not an idea, just a quiet tug behind the heart. He turned and walked, past the moss garden, past the stone lantern smudged with lichen, down a path he rarely took, the one that curved behind the temple into a part of the forest where the light changed direction and time seemed to thin. He walked without aim, no sandals, no staff, just silence at his back, and that same quiet question curled gently in his chest. Hours may have passed, or none at all. Eventually the path dissolved into a grove of slender birch trees, and there, half hidden among ferns and moss, was a pond, small, oval, still as breath held in wonder. No frogs, no wind, no falling leaves, just the water holding the sky like a memory. Tenzan sat on a smooth rock beside it, and for the first time in many moons he did not try to understand. He simply was. Birdsong returned in the far distance. A drop of water fell from a leaf overhead and disappeared into the pond without a sound. And in that moment, somewhere between presence and forgetting, he felt it, the bell, still ringing, not in the air, not in his ears, but in the spaciousness inside him. It had never stopped. It had only become quieter than sound, wide as sky, deep as sleep. The silence that remained was not empty. It was listening, and Tenzan, he was not listening to it. He was part of it. He breathed out slowly, the exhale longer than the inhale, and felt something loosen inside. Some old knot of striving or searching, untied by stillness itself. When he returned to the temple, Master Gendo was sweeping the courtyard with a straw broom, his movements slow and even. He did not look up, but after a moment he spoke. "You heard it?" And Tenzan nodded, though no words rose. From that day on he struck the bell the same way. Once, gently, but his listening had changed. He no longer waited for the sound to end. He waited for the silence to arrive, and within it he found not answers but presence, not knowledge but knowing. And so, if ever you find yourself in a quiet valley on a mist-wrapped morning, and you hear a bell that seems not to ring but to ripple through your bones, pause and listen, not just with your ears, but with the space between your thoughts. You may find yourself not hearing, but being heard. And you may wonder, gently, what have I been missing beneath all the noise?
And now our journey finds its quiet place. The path has been walked, the lantern's glow has softened, the evening breeze has whispered, and the stillness has spoken. Whether you stayed with the story from start to finish or drifted away into the arms of sleep along the way, you are exactly where you need to be. There's no need to chase the thoughts, no need to grasp or remember every word. Stories like these are never meant to be captured. They are meant to be received, felt deeply in the gentle spaces within, like the touch of soft rain on a quiet garden, or the lingering warmth of a hand once held. They leave behind something tender, not loud, not sharp, but subtle, a stillness small enough to settle inside your heart, a breath calmer than before, a weight lifted, lightening the soul. This is the grace of quiet moments, where nothing is required and everything is given. If this story brought you calm, please consider liking the video, sharing your thoughts in the comments, and subscribing to Zen Mind Journey to join our community of peaceful hearts. If you are still awake, you may now rest fully. Close your eyes, let your thoughts float freely, then fade gently away. You don't need to hold the story close. It has already found its way to you.